Hi everyone, welcome back to this YouTube channel for leadership development. Today I'm excited because it's my very first video in this channel with a guest, and my guest today is Tara McAlister. I'm going to bounce it over to Tara so that Tara can introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she's doing, and then we are going to be diving into a discussion about having difficult conversations. Tara, welcome, our first guest,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate you being here. Would you mind telling
Well,
our...
if I'm the first, that means I'm the best, right? No,
That's
just
right.
kidding. Or the worst. I don't know. Thank you so much for having me on here. I love talking about people. I've actually been in HR almost 30 years. So I love helping solve people problems for businesses. I have a company called The People Strategy, and I love working with business owners to help them find ways to help their team work better together or for that business owner,
Yeah.
whether it's helping them to understand expectations or helping them to communicate better. And difficult conversations, 70% of issues really come from miscommunication. And especially on teams, when we miscommunicate or we don't communicate because it's going to be a difficult conversation, issues happen
Mm-hmm.
and it results in lost revenue. It result in people losing positions and jobs and things. So being able to have difficult conversations from a skill set is something that helps business owners and managers do their job better and therefore help their companies. So I think it's an important topic to discuss from a
Mm-hmm.
leadership standpoint.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think I've been in both sides. I've been in the side of the manager who had to figure out how to have a difficult conversation, and I've been on the side of somebody having to have a difficult conversation with me. It's never easy, right? Because there's a human side to leadership and operations, and I think a lot of times people in companies like to pretend like psychology doesn't exist, but but no, it's very much there, right? Since you have a ton of experience, can you tell us, are there examples of situations where somebody might be having a hard time or having the courage to have a difficult conversation with a colleague or
Yeah,
an employee?
I think one of the kind of things that just kind of came up to me when I was thinking is, um, I remember one time we had an employee who was excellent at her job. Excellent. So excellent, I guess, that we promoted her.
Okay.
And it was probably not the right time. She was
Mm,
not ready for the promotion.
mm,
And as she was coming along in this position, she was not performing well.
mm.
And it was time for us to have a conversation with her about, you're not doing well. And here's this high performer who had always done well. And
Yeah.
now we were going to have a difficult conversation with her of, you're not doing well and this is not like you. And I remember her direct supervisor was like, I can't tell her. How do I do this? And I'm like, it's the right thing to do to have this conversation with her. And I remember sitting down with her and saying, I I know where you are right now. Let's talk about where you are right now. And I think when we got to the same level and we were I could feel how she was feeling.
Mm,
She was more relieved that we were having the conversation and the fact that we weren't avoiding it. Like,
mm.
she was, okay, great. Here, let's have this conversation. I am failing and I need help. And we
Yes.
met we're at the same place. And I think as a leader, what I learned that day is that a lot of times people respected me, I know at that point more as a leader because I was having the conversation with her, having
Right.
that difficult conversation with her. And I know as an HR person, I've had the termination conversations. I've had the you're not doing well conversations. And that's hard. And that's not, some people, they don't like it. But sometimes those conversations have to be had.
Right.
And as a leader, you have to be able to help to have them in a way that's constructive.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be respectful of the person. You can't be vague. You need to be specific. You can't just say you're doing a bad job. You have to be able to say, this is what we're seeing. Help us. What kind of resources could we provide you to get you here?
Mm,
And sometimes if it's not performance, maybe it's a, a smell. You know, I've had employees who have smelled or have
mm,
had an odor. And that's difficult because it's something very personal, right?
right.
Sometimes it's a medication that they're taking. Sometimes
Mm,
people will start taking a new medication and it reacts with their body and they're not even aware of it.
right.
Or they have a certain perfume that they've started wearing. So sometimes having those conversations brings something to somebody's attention and the way that it's presented. If it's done in a very constructive way, if it's specific, if it explains the impact that behavior or whatever's going on happens, and it's done in a professional way, it can actually build that relationship better than it was before that conversation. And that's what I've seen over my career.
Do
But
you?
it's a skill because
Yeah.
people who either avoid it or do it really badly can have really adverse reactions and bad things can happen if it's not done well.
Right. I've seen it where people do it well, people do it badly, or people don't do it at all because they're avoiding, right?
Right.
Um, in your experience, do you have examples of the avoidance? Like why are people avoiding it? And if they are avoiding, if like say we have some fresh managers listening to this and they're like, I have to have a difficult conversation, but I've never done it before and I'm scared or I'm avoiding.
Right. Right.
What would be some good advice you would give to this person?
You know, I actually was working with let's call him a less senior manager,
Yes.
and she had an older coworker, an older employee that reported to her. And
Mm,
she saw this employee kind of as a figure. So there was this dynamic there, and the employee was not performing.
mm,
And she had to go to this employee and say, "You're not performing." She's like, "But she's kind of like a mother. She's been doing this a long time, you know. She's gonna respect me enough." And I remember working with her, and I said, "What you've got to do is explain the impact her performance or her lack of performance is having." On the team and holding her accountable. Because if you don't hold her accountable, but you hold everybody else accountable, how does that look like to the rest of the team?
right.
So as a manager, you have to go in and say, you know, Linda, this is the performance. You're what we're seeing, this, and this. I want to help you. Here are the resources. Let's move on this together. Let's show a cooperation. Have you both recognize that? If she doesn't recognize it, show her, this is
Hmm.
what we're seeing. Um, if it's something that simple. Now, if it's a situation where I had another employee manager who had a very, very strong personality employee
Mm,
who loved to take all the attention onto herself during a meeting. So she spoke up all the time.
mm,
And nobody wanted to confront this person because she was so boisterous and she had this big personality. And she's like, I know if I just talk to her, I just don't, she's just such a big personality. And the
okay.
manager was kind of laid back and more of an introvert.
Hmm.
And I kept saying, okay, what's the effect long term if you don't address this issue? What are your meetings going to look like long term?
Yeah.
All they're going to be is this person coming into your meetings and taking control.
Mm,
And the way that people are going to look at you as a manager is going to be impacted,
hmm.
right? So I had her sit down and I said, well, what is it that we really like about this employee? What does she bring to the team? What does her personality help bring to the team?
Yes.
What are the positives? What are also the negatives that that personality brings to the team?
Right.
So together we role played, and I played the big personality, and I had her show me and talk to me like she was going to talk to that employee. And she just said, let's have a conversation about how your personality impacts our department. You're able to help drive projects because you're really good about keeping things on deadlines and
Hmm.
this. But what I've noticed in our meetings, people are kind of afraid to speak up because you tend to fill the room.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
know that's not your intention. I know that you're very team oriented, but sometimes when you speak up, I notice other people don't want to speak up. And I think it was her helping her show and the impact of that other person's behavior that the other person wasn't even realizing,
Right.
and doing it in a way that was very constructive so that she had that difficult conversation in a way that was constructive for that person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So difficult conversations can be constructive if they're planned ahead of time. And that's the one thing I would say, the number one thing is if you're going to have a difficult conversation, plan it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you're going to say. What is your ultimate goal?
Mm-hmm.
And be prepared for it to go to the extreme. And be prepared to stop conversations.
Mm.
Another thing I think a lot of leaders do is they feel like they've got to like hit the finish line with every conversation. There is a way in any conversation to stop it, especially if it's going down a road that's not going to be constructive, and say, you know what, this might not be the best time for us to talk about it. Let's get back together tomorrow and talk more when we both can be more constructive. So
Got you.
planning it and also feeling strong enough to say, you know what, let's stop this conversation. But, planning, I think, is the key.
Planning, that's a really important tip. Just now that you're saying it, it refreshed my memory from my times when I was a leader having to have difficult conversations. I think what helped me at the time, and this was taking advice from people like you, Tara, like mentors and people who were ahead of me, right? Somebody taught me the situation behavior impact model. And
Right.
so I would write it down on a
Mm-hmm.
notepad, what the situation was, what the impact was, the behavior that I observed, right? And yeah, it was almost like I had to read from a script, especially if I was feeling intimidated, because I've had to have that difficult conversation with my boss, not just with people below me, but people above me too, several
Mm-hmm.
times. And yeah, it can be
Mm-hmm.
intimidating, but I think to your point, being prepared, planning, maybe doing a little mental conditioning can only help,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then to
Right.
your like I love your point about being prepared to stop the conversation if it gets out of hand and saying, you know what, let's just pick this up tomorrow.
Well, you have to be prepared for the pushback, right? You have to be prepared for them to say stuff like, "Well, everybody else does that," or
Mm-hmm.
"You're always criticizing me," or the other one, or when people just do this
Mm.
and give you the silent treatment. You have to be prepared for that. When they say like, "Oh, everybody," well, everybody does this, and then you have to redirect and say, "Well, I'm not talking about everybody today. Today, I'm focused on you because you are important to me today.
Mm-hmm.
You're the person. I'm not criticizing you. I'm putting effort towards your improvement because
Mm-hmm.
I see value in you, and I want you to know that."
Mm-hmm.
And then when they do give you that silent treatment, say, if you're not ready and prepared to talk about this right now, but it is something we are going to talk about. This doesn't mean we're not going to talk about it. This just means we might not be talking about it right now.
Right.
So just because they're silent doesn't give them that free pass not to have to talk about it. So just being prepared, and planning ahead of knowing kind of what you might get is that pushback, and that planning process is important.
Right. Just talking to you about this specific concept is bringing back so many thoughts and memories about, like, man, being a leader is complex. It's a lot harder than people give it credit for, right?
All
You're
right.
not just there to tell people what to do or set goals, or you actually have to deal with the human side of how
Right.
will your employee react to you or respond to you when you are trying to give them a constructive feedback or holding them accountable. Do you, when your experience with doing these kinds of like difficult conversations, do you recommend that people document the conversation right away or be more
Well,
verbal at first? What do you think?
I have always I'm an HR person, so documentation is our love language,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I believe in having conversations, and then I'll always like to do a follow-up email, and I would say something like, Linda, thank you for your time today. I recognize what it is. It's tough to talk about these kinds of things, and I appreciate your cooperation.
Hmm.
Like I said, at times in meetings, it feels that you take control. I know that's not your intention, and as we discussed today, it can have positive effects on motivation, but at the same time can keep others from participating in meetings.
Hmm.
I appreciate your attention to focus on this, and if you have any questions, let's talk about it later. And sending an email. So you have a documentation that you've had a conversation, you're both agreeing on what the conversation was, it's time dated, and it's done. And then
Hmm.
you have your documentation. And you're also thanking the person for having the conversation too, right? Because it is difficult, and you want to say, I get that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
I mean, it's two humans, right? It's the in your example, Linda is human and the manager is human, and there's the emotions, there's anxiety, there's resistance and fear, and there's all sorts of emotions running in the background. So it's an important
Yeah,
process.
we've all had that, everybody, I don't care age, culture, whatever, you've all had that feeling of everybody wants to do a good job.
Hmm.
Everybody wants to get the gold star on their paper from the teacher, it everybody wants to do well. So when you do have a difficult conversation, it's important to say thank you for having that conversation with me.
Hmm.
And 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 it's equally as important as that relationship continues and you see improvement,
Hmm.
recognizing that because it is hard. Um, I'm giving that specific example about Linda because it actually was a situation, and I watched that employee work really hard to keep her mouth closed during meetings, and I would recognize that afterwards. I'd be like, I know that was hard. I
Yes.
actually watched you a couple of times, like actually sit back and almost hold your hands on your lap because I know you want it. But because you did that, did you notice how Nick was more verbal during this
Hmm.
meeting than he's ever been? And she was like, yeah, I did. I noticed that. I'm like, you did that. You were able to get Nick to do like, and so I saw her like, oh, yeah, I was able to do that. I made Nick So trying to turn it into something that makes them feel more successful by recognizing something that they can improve upon. So it's a full learning experience all the time, but difficult conversations and being able to have them, it's key in any leadership role.
Yes.
And something that people need to know how to do.
It's key, it's needed, and it deserves. From hearing you talk about this, I think it's important that we emphasize it deserves the appropriate amount of preparation, intention, and to be taken seriously, right? Like you said, like I think you might have said earlier, it's better if you plan ahead and prepare, even like role play in the example you gave. It shouldn't be done like willy-nilly, spur of the moment, like, and especially should not be done if the leader is emotionally activated, right? Like if the leader's having a bad day and they're stressed out, and right now being stressed out and having a bad day is definitely not the right time to have a difficult conversation with an employee.
No. No, and the employee needs to understand why you're having this conversation. My
Mm-hmm.
intent is not to hurt your feelings. My intent is not to upset you or to make you think that you're a bad person. My
Mm-hmm.
intent is to do the best for this team and help the team better communicate. Or my intent is to get us to work in a more cohesive way. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure that the person realizes I didn't wake up this morning and was going to try to say the meanest things to Linda that I possibly could to like hurt her feelings, and that's part of the planning process because you want to make sure you verbalize that first. My
Mm-hmm.
intent is this. My goal is this.
Right.
So that they know that you didn't wake up that morning to make it the why do we hate Linda day,
Yeah.
which, sometimes people can think you woke up just to pick on them that day. And that's not the intent. And if you can get past that, then they can actually hear what you're trying to say.
Right.
And I usually open up with, we're going to have a tough conversation today. And it's as tough for me as to talk about it as it probably is for you to hear about it. And I will, make sure that they understand that I'm having as much a difficult time too, because I care. If I
Yes.
didn't care, it would be hard for me,
Yes.
you
That's
know?
right. That's
And
right.
so if they can understand that and feel that as a leader, I think you're gonna get more out of it.
Hmm.
And that's part of that planning process is being able to know how you're going to communicate that intent.
Yeah. So important. I'm so glad you came on here, Tara, to talk about this. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you for inviting me so much. I appreciate it.
Yes. Tara, so before we close the video, are there things you would like the audience to know about you? Where can they find you?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, Tara McAlister, the People Strategy, and I love working with business leaders to help them figure out their people strategy. How do I help my team work better? Whether
Yeah.
it's do they understand the expectations? Do they understand what I need them to do to meet our strategic goals for us to make the most money we can and have the best culture? So
Right.
I love talking to business leaders who say, I can't keep employees, or
Yeah.
what can I do to make my employees happier? Or what can I do to recruit the best people? Who do I need? So that's what I really and truly love to do. Plus, I love to connect people who are looking to network and meet the right people to grow their own businesses. So
Yeah.
that's my true love.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And with your experience, you said you have like 30 years of HR experience. So you live, breathe HR, right? Like, I bet you
I
can help
do.
a lot of companies with your breadth of knowledge about HR. So awesome.
I do
Well,
love talking about it. I do.
maybe you should start your own podcast, Tara. Here's an idea.
Oh,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you thought the tips that Tara gave us were helpful, please share it with somebody who might find them helpful. And thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.